Our story begins with a man who lived and died as a nobody, but fate had other plans. Given a second chance, he awakens in the body of a nobleman, inheriting a crumbling land plagued by corruption, famine, and enemies lurking in the shadows. Armed with the wisdom of his past life, he sets out to reshape his territory, building an army, advancing industry, and forging a kingdom that defies all expectations. It all starts in a hospital where a doctor urgently calls for help, instructing the team to put a patient on a ventilator. That patient is Jin Leshin. His chest rises and falls erratically, his heart pounding like a drum on the verge of breaking. For 20 years, Jin dedicated himself to industrial mechanical design, pouring his life into his work. But all he got in return was disappointment and loneliness. His relentless drive finally pushed him too far, shattering his mental and physical health. Since birth, tragedy followed him. A car accident took his parents, leaving him to grow up as an orphan. Still, he fought through every hardship, holding onto the hope that one day life would reward his perseverance. But that day never came. After graduating, Jin managed to land a low-paying job that barely covered his expenses for the next 20 years. His personal life was just as empty. He had never experienced the warmth of companionship, not even something as simple as holding someone's hand. Now it seemed his lonely journey was reaching its end. "Jin, can you hear me?" A familiar voice, filled with concern, broke through the chaos. His closest friend was desperately trying to keep him from slipping away. But as Jin lay there, he couldn't help but wonder, had his life ever truly meant anything? Was there any purpose to all the years he had struggled through? Overwhelmed by exhaustion, a single thought crossed his mind. Maybe I'll just rest for a little while. When he opened his eyes again, everything had changed. He was no longer in a hospital room, but in a place unlike anything he had ever seen. Lavish silk curtains draped the walls and dazzling crystal lights illuminated the space. The sheer luxury of his surroundings made him panic. Had he somehow spent his entire life savings on an extravagant hospital suite? Before he could make sense of it all, a glowing notification appeared before him. "Welcome to the magical continent of Eldera." A shock ran through him. Could this really be happening? Was he inside one of those Isekai stories he had only read about in fiction? In his unfamiliar world, Jin soon realized he was no longer himself. He had become someone else entirely. Now known as Reen, he struggled to make sense of his new reality, but clear answers remained out of reach. Days passed, and Reen found himself living in what felt like a dream. Servants attended to his every need, and luxury surrounded him at every turn. As he adjusted to this strange yet comfortable life, he gradually uncovered the truth. He had truly died and been reborn as Reen Edgar, the third son of Duke Aldarian Edgar. Unlike his past life of isolation, Reen now had a loving family. His older sister, always looking out for him, placed a feast in front of him, insisting, "Eat well, little brother. You're growing and you shouldn't go hungry." His brother, equally caring, handed him a shimmering vial, explaining, "This is magic water. It boosts magical power. I paid a high price for it." Even their mother showed her affection by gifting him a finely crafted shirt she had sewn herself, urging him to try it on. As the youngest and most cherished member of the family, Reen lived in unparalleled comfort. Yet beneath the warmth of his new home, he couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't belong. Why had he been given this second chance? Why was he suddenly surrounded by such love and privilege? To calm his lingering doubts, he convinced himself perhaps this was fate's way of making up for the hardships of his past life. The world of Eldera was nothing short of extraordinary, where magic served as the foundation of daily life, powering everything from transportation to infrastructure. At the heart of the continent stood the mighty Caradorial Empire, the largest human nation, home to a diverse mix of races, including elves and dwarves. The Edgar family, to which Reen now belonged, held immense power, ruling over a vast domain spanning 300,000 square kilometers. Their lands were rich and fertile, dotted with thriving fields and anchored by a grand castle. Over 1 million people lived under their rule, ensuring that as a noble, Reen never lacked for anything: fine clothes, exquisite meals, even a personal maid at his service. Yet despite the wealth and privilege, Reen couldn't escape his past. Every time he gazed into a mirror, he didn't see a noble's face, he saw Jin's. The man he used to be still lingered in his reflection, a ghost of a life he had left behind. One day, his quiet contemplation was interrupted by Leah, a bright and cheerful maid. With a polite smile, she informed him, "Your father wishes to see you." Without delay, she led him to the study, where Duke Aldarian sat engrossed in reports from across their lands. Reen approached with the grace expected of a noble and greeted his father respectfully, waiting for him to speak. The Duke's gaze was sharp, his voice firm as he finally asked, "Do you know why I've called you here?" A sense of unease settled in Reen's chest. He had no idea what was coming, but he kept his voice steady as he softly replied, "No, father, I don't." Duke Aldarian leaned back in his chair, his stern expression softening just a little. Reen, you've reached the age where you should start managing your own territory. Have you thought about where you'd like it to be? Reen was caught off guard. The idea of ruling over land had never even crossed his mind. Confused, he hesitated before asking if he was really expected to inherit a territory. Aldarian let out a sigh at his son's lack of awareness. He explained that it was tradition for nobles of Reen's age to take charge of their own lands. Standing up, the Duke walked over to a large map pinned to the wall. Your land will be in the northwest, he stated, pointing to a section of the map. It's relatively safe, but there's a major problem. The region lacks mages, which has made food production an ongoing struggle. His voice grew heavier as he continued. For now, our territory is stable, but the Caradorial Empire is growing weaker. Its future is uncertain. Reen silently agreed. The royal family was losing its grip, and the Empire's political system was falling apart. Corruption and hidden rivalries fueled constant conflicts between noble houses, turning the Empire into a battlefield of schemes and power struggles. Since his rebirth, Reen had experienced love and care like never before. The warmth of his new family was something he had never known in his past life. That love alone gave him a reason to fight. He had been given a second chance, and he was determined to protect those who truly cared for him. Watching his son lost in thought, Duke Aldarian felt a twinge of concern. Was he placing too much pressure on Reen? Wanting to ease the weight of responsibility, he reassured him, "You're not alone in this. You have your brother, your sister, and me. We will always support you." But Reen's mind was already racing. A spark of determination lit up his eyes as he turned to his father with a serious expression. "If I can solve the food supply problem, will that make our territory more secure?" he asked. Aldarian smiled at his son's enthusiasm, but knew his approach was too straightforward. "It's not that simple," he cautioned. "Fixing the food crisis isn't just about effort. It takes careful planning and gradual progress." However, Reen wasn't thinking in simple terms. He was drawing from the vast knowledge of human civilization, built through centuries of industrial revolutions. Without hesitation, he met his father's gaze and declared with confidence, "I'll take full responsibility for solving the food crisis." And so his journey began. His new home was Isling City, a remote yet promising land filled with both opportunities and dangers. To the north, the territory of Grand Duke Ryan loomed, a sworn enemy. To the west, the mysterious lands of the elves remained an enigma. And to the south, the vast, uncharted ocean stretched endlessly, hiding secrets yet to be uncovered. Isling City's location had made it a frequent battleground over the years, leaving once fertile lands barren, resources drained, and its population dangerously low. As Reen's carriage moved steadily toward his new home, he buried himself in documents detailing the state of his territory. Sitting across from him, Leah, his ever-loyal companion, watched him closely, worry evident in her eyes. Reen understood her concern. Reviving the land wouldn't be easy. If he wanted to rebuild Isling City, he needed people. A strong workforce was the foundation of any industrial revolution, and without one, progress would be impossible. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but he had faith in his abilities. Fortunately, he wasn't starting from nothing. Among his greatest assets was a unique skill granted to him by the system, Human Resource Scan. This ability allowed him to instantly assess a person's potential, making it easier to identify talent. He had already tested it on his family, giving him a solid grasp of the world's talent standards. His first goal upon reaching Isling City was clear: find gifted individuals who could help him rebuild the territory. Meanwhile, Leah silently recalled Duke Aldarian's parting words to her: support Reen and make sure he doesn't cause chaos. She sighed, casting a glance at her young master. Please don't make a mess of things, she thought to herself, hoping Reen wouldn't turn the city upside down before he even got started. In Isling City, tension filled the air within the city lord's residence. A nervous official hurriedly reported that Duke Aldarian's youngest son would be arriving soon. He suggested taking action before Reen could establish himself, but the masked man seated across from him remained unfazed. With a cold, calculated tone, he ordered them to wait for further instructions, forbidding anyone from making a move against Reen for now. Despite his composed exterior, anger simmered beneath his words as he spoke of making Aldarian pay for past grievances. Meanwhile, a blonde-haired man in the room was far less composed. He anxiously fidgeted, his mind consumed with worry over falsified financial records and the large sums of tax money he had embezzled. The masked man, however, merely chuckled. Reen? He's just a clueless noble brat. He won't even think to check the books, he sneered. In his mind, all they had to do was hand the young lord a stack of meaningless documents, and he'd be none the wiser. Reluctantly, the blonde-haired man accepted the plan and left to prepare for Reen's arrival. Meanwhile, Reen's carriage neared the outskirts of Isling City. Peering out the window, he took in the sight before him: barren fields, abandoned farmlands, and a land left to wither. Rain's expression grew serious as he took in the sight before him. He turned to Leah and asked for a map, studying the layout of the land with keen interest. His eyes lingered on the river to the west and the harbor to the south. An idea sparked in his mind. If he could dredge the river and construct a canal connecting it to the sea, it could revitalize the region, bringing trade and prosperity back to Aisling City. Before he could dwell further on his plan, a desperate cry shattered his focus. A young girl knelt in the dirt, clutching the leg of a man, most likely her father, who seemed determined to head toward a gambling den. Tears streamed down her face as she begged him not to waste their last bit of money. "Please, father. This is for mother's medicine. If you lose it, she'll die." Her voice trembled with fear and desperation. But the man, consumed by greed, refused to listen. His face twisted with frustration as he shouted at her to let go, fully convinced that luck would turn in his favor. When the girl refused to release him, his patience snapped. He raised his hand, ready to strike her. Before his hand could come down, Rian moved. With a swift punch, he sent the man crashing to the ground. Pain shot through Rian's fists and he winced. This was, after all, the first time he had ever thrown a punch. But the burning anger in his eyes made it clear he had no regrets. Leah quickly ran to Rian, her face full of worry. She sighed and said, "Next time you decide to hit someone, at least tell me first so I can bring something to protect you." Rian laughed and shook his head. "I didn't plan it. It just happened in the moment." He then turned toward the man lying on the ground. "Leah, check on the girl. I'll deal with him." The gambler held his face, looking up at Rian in shock. But Rian's eyes were cold and filled with anger. "You took money meant for your family just to waste it on gambling. And you even tried to hit your own daughter?" The man frowned and snapped back. "Who do you think you were to tell me what to do?" Rian stepped closer, his presence suddenly intimidating. "Who I am doesn't matter. But listen carefully. If I ever see you near a gambling den again, you'll regret it." Rian's firm voice and sharp glare made the man freeze in fear. His face turned pale as he stuttered an apology, swearing to stay away from gambling. Without another word, he turned and ran as fast as he could. Feeling satisfied with how he handled the situation, Rian turned to the girl, who stood frozen in shock. Worried, he gently asked, "Are you okay?" Then he activated his system to check her condition. The girl named Lillian quickly bowed her head, her voice full of gratitude. "Thank you. If I had lost that money, I wouldn't have been able to save my mother." As Rian glanced at the system screen, something caught his attention. Most of her stats were average, but one thing stood out. She got a natural talent for agriculture and harvesting. Seeing this hidden potential, Rian made a quick decision. He would recruit her to help restore the land. With a warm smile, he guessed that she was on her way to find a doctor for her mother. "We're heading into the city too. Why don't you come with us?" he offered. Lillian hesitated, glancing at the carriage. "I don't want to dirty it," she said softly. Rian chuckled and shook his head. "It's just a carriage, just some wooden planks nailed together. There's no such thing as clean or dirty when it comes to transportation." Reassured by his words, Lillian nodded, ready to join them. But before they continued, Rian's expression suddenly turned serious. "Tell me something. Why is there a gambling den in a place where people are already struggling to survive?" Rian thought about the struggles this region had recently faced. Last autumn, soldiers under Grand Duke Ryan had attacked, causing heavy losses. Then in early spring, massive floods swept through, leaving the people barely able to survive. The streets of Aisling City still bore the scars of these disasters. Beggars lined the roads and hopelessness filled the air. As Rian walked through the ruined city, he realized that before anything else, he needed to take a proper population count to see how many people were still able to work. But first, he had to visit the city lord's estate to check the reserve funds and figure out how much could be used to rebuild the infrastructure. Turning to Lillian, he asked, "Do you know where the city lord's estate is?" Before she could answer, a loud shout cut through the air. A blonde-haired man on horseback charged down the street, yelling for people to move aside. He didn't seem to care about the chaos he was causing, his reckless riding putting others at risk. Leah acted quickly, grabbing Rian and pulling him out of the way just in time to avoid the galloping horse. The rider didn't even glance back, disappearing into the distance without a second thought about the trouble he had left behind. Leah, however, wasn't as calm. She glared at the disappearing rider, her anger burning. To her, anyone who dared put Rian in danger deserved the harshest punishment. Still gripping Rian protectively, she didn't realize how tightly she was holding him until he struggled to breathe. "Leah, I need air," he gasped. Startled, she quickly let go, apologizing and asking if he was hurt. Rian chuckled, shaking his head. "I'm fine. Thanks for reacting so fast." But his expression soon turned serious again as he turned to Lillian. "Do you know who that rider was?" Lillian trembled slightly as she answered. "That was the young master of the Edelman family. They control all the gambling dens in Aisling City. That's where their wealth comes from." Rian's eyes lit up with interest. A rich family running gambling dens, that could be an opportunity. If they had money, perhaps he could find a way to use it for his plans. Without hesitation, he asked Lillian to take him to one of their gambling dens. She immediately protested, worried he would end up losing all his money. But Reen remained calm and confident. "Don't worry," he assured her. "I won't be the one losing today." Lillian watched him carefully. There was something different about this noble young man. Who exactly was he? Reen soon arrived at the gambling den, a building that stood in stark contrast to the rest of the city. Its lavish design was a clear display of wealth, a sharp reminder of the gap between the rich and the struggling poor. Guards stood watch at the entrance, but Reen walked forward without hesitation. A smirk played on his lips as he thought about his plan. This place would soon fund his industrial projects. Inside, the air was thick with noise and desperation. Some gamblers begged for loans, convinced they could turn their luck around with one more bet. Others cheered over small victories, while many groaned in defeat, watching their last coins slip away. Reen studied the scene carefully. As long as this gambling den thrived, the people at Aisling City would never have the drive to work hard and rebuild their lives. Leah, standing close by, leaned in and whispered that their soldiers had surrounded the building. "Shall we move in?" she asked, her tone serious. But Reen remained calm. "Not yet," he said with a knowing smile. "I'm waiting for a bigger fish to fall into the net." As he spoke, a well-dressed staff member approached, offering a polite smile. "Welcome, young master. What game would you like to play today?" Reen returned the staff member's smile, pretending to be inexperienced. He admitted that he didn't know much about gambling but wanted to give it a try. Acting curious, he asked for a simple game recommendation. Sensing an easy target, the attendant suggested a dice game and handed him 2 chips, claiming they were free so he could test his luck. Reen accepted them with a satisfied nod. As the game began, he casually placed his chips on a small betting slot. Watching this, 2 casino employees exchanged smug glances, confident they had tricked him. The dice rolled and landed on double sixes. Big. The attendant sighed dramatically, pretending to feel bad, and told Reen he had been close to winning. Reen played along, acting surprised at how fast the game ended. He shrugged and commented that it wasn't very fun before turning away, saying he felt hungry and was leaving. But before he could take a step, the attendant suddenly blocked his path. His polite smile disappeared, replaced by a smug, mocking expression. His voice turned sharp as he demanded payment for the chips Reen had just used. Reen frowned, pretending to be confused. He calmly asked, "When did I ever agree to owe you anything?" The attendant stepped closer, his smirk widening as he explained that the chips weren't gifts, they were loans. He claimed that each chip was worth 100 gold coins, and with added interest and processing fees, Reen now owed a total of 250 gold. Then with a sneer, he suggested that if Reen couldn't pay, he could leave his maid as collateral. Lillian's face turned red with anger. She immediately called out the scam, accusing the attendant of lying. She turned to Reen and explained that the chips were barely worth a silver coin each. Hearing this, the attendant's expression darkened. Furious that she had exposed his trick, he barked an order for the guards to punish her. But before he could finish his command, Reen moved. With a single powerful punch, he sent the man flying backward, crashing into a table. Adjusting his clothes as if nothing had happened, Reen spoke in a calm, cold voice. "Someone like you has no right to speak here." The casino erupted into chaos. Gamblers scrambled across the floor, grabbing at the scattered chips. Reen sighed as he watched them, shaking his head. "Not a single useful person in sight," he muttered. Just then, a loud voice cut through the noise, demanding to know who was causing trouble. Reen turned toward the source. It was the same man he had seen earlier, the reckless rider on horseback. Reen's lips curved into a confident smile. This was the moment he had been waiting for. The arrival of the man instantly silenced the chaos in the room. With an irritated glare, he scanned the scene before coldly ordering his guards to deal with the troublemakers. Without hesitation, the guards began beating anyone nearby, their ruthless attacks ignoring desperate pleas for mercy. The remaining gamblers shrank back in fear, unwilling to interfere. The young master of the Edwin family sneered at the trembling crowd, warning them to stay quiet unless they wanted to share the same fate. Meanwhile, Lillian clung to Leah's arm, her face filled with guilt. She whispered that this was all her fault. If she hadn't brought them here, none of this would have happened. Shame washed over her as she realized she had dragged Reen and Leah into danger. But then, she remembered something. Reen had personally ensured her mother was taken to the hospital, even promising to cover the medical expenses. That act of kindness gave her strength. Clenching her fists, Lillian took a deep breath and stepped forward. With unwavering determination, she declared that she wouldn't let them cheat her brother. Her boldness sent a ripple through the crowd. Whispers spread as people questioned who she was and how she dared to stand up against someone as powerful as Vezirlo, the young master of the Edwin family. Vezirlo's icy glare hardened as rage flared in his eyes. Lillian, however, didn't back down. She boldly accused him of using the casino to ruin families, exploiting the weak for his own gain. Refusing to let him intimidate Reen and Leah, she stood firm, declaring that they were good people who didn't deserve such cruelty. Seething with fury, Vezirlo lunged at her. Despite her fear, Lillian didn't flinch, using her small frame to shield Reen. But before Vezirlo could strike, Reen swiftly stepped in, catching his arm mid-air. Without hesitation, he activated his system ability to analyze Vezirlo's stats. The results were telling, his attributes were unimpressive, his loyalty was nearly non-existent, and his personality was defined by cruelty and bloodlust. It was clear to Reen that the Edwin family posed a serious threat, one that could turn against him at any moment. Blocked and humiliated, Vezirlo's glare darkened. He accused Reen of disrespecting the casino's rules, but Reen, unbothered, let go of his arm and replied calmly. He understood the rules perfectly. This world was ruled by strength, and the strong dictated what was right and wrong. Vezirlo sneered, fully convinced that he was the most powerful person in Exiling City. His voice dripped with arrogance as he scoffed at Reen, demanding to know if he even realized who he was standing against. Reen's expression remained calm and unwavering as he replied with confidence. He told Vezirlo that he didn't need to know who he was, what truly mattered was strength, and in this world, power dictated the rules. With a sharp clap of his hands, he gave the signal. In an instant, his soldiers stormed into the casino, taking control of the scene. The focus then shifted to a grand banquet held in Reen's honor, attended by the most powerful and influential figures in the city, each with their own hidden motives. Among them was Lucas, the head of a prestigious family. He had planned to use this gathering to work with the city lord and teach Reen a lesson. His original plan had involved Vezirlo, hoping to use him as a way to build a connection with Reen that could later be manipulated. However, Vezirlo was nowhere to be seen, leaving Lucas both confused and frustrated. Realizing that the city lord's incompetence alone wouldn't be enough to accomplish his goals, Lucas quickly began rethinking his strategy. The banquet hall buzzed with quiet murmurs as guests whispered among themselves. But suddenly, a voice rang out announcing Reen's arrival. Instantly, the atmosphere shifted. The once lively room fell silent, tension thick in the air. As Reen stepped inside, his presence was commanding, forcing the guests to quickly adjust their expressions and posture in response. The head of the Raven family quickly stepped forward, introducing himself and presenting a gift to Reen. Not wanting to miss the opportunity, the head of the Roaster family eagerly introduced his daughter, hoping to gain Reen's favor. However, as Reen's sharp gaze swept across the room, the chatter died down. With a firm voice, he instructed everyone to be silent. Once the room was still, Reen announced that it was time to begin. He signaled to his attendants, who brought forward a large blueprint, an unusual object that immediately drew the curiosity of the guests. With a confident gesture, Reen pointed to the blueprint and explained that it was a design for a dam, something he had sketched earlier that afternoon. He added that while the finer details would be refined by skilled craftsmen, the core idea was already in place. The room buzzed with murmurs as the guests exchanged confused looks. One person finally spoke up, questioning what a dam was and even wondering if it was some kind of fishing tool. Reen, unfazed by the misunderstanding, raised a hand for silence. He then turned to Leah and instructed her to display a map of the region, preparing to explain his vision more clearly. Reen began his presentation by sharing his findings from his earlier survey of Exiling City. He explained that the city's yearly flooding was caused by a poorly maintained canal in the northern region. To solve this problem, he proposed building a dam at that location. The dam would allow them to control the water supply, storing excess water for irrigation during dry seasons and releasing it strategically during heavy rains to prevent floods. Among the listeners, Lucas found himself genuinely impressed. If Reen's plan succeeded, it would greatly improve the city's agricultural output. For the first time, Lucas realized that Reen was more than just another noble. He had both intelligence and vision. However, an older man in the audience interrupted, questioning what any of this had to do with them. Reen remained calm as he explained that the project required funding and that he was seeking their investment. His statement sent a ripple of shock through the crowd, followed by murmurs of protest. Many quickly claimed they lacked the money to contribute. Lucas, meanwhile, stayed quiet, watching the scene unfold. He admitted to himself that Reen had a clever mind, but expecting these greedy merchants to willingly invest. Reen, however, was far from naive. With a confident smile, he assured them that there was no need to pretend to be poor. He had a way for everyone to make a fortune. He then revealed something shocking. Earlier that day, he had taken control of the casino and seized nearly 50,000 gold coins. But that wasn't all. he hinted that several other casinos in Aisling City could face the same fate. The room fell silent as the guests struggled to process his words. Some whispered nervously, worried that their investments in local casinos might be gone. Others anxiously hoped that the casino Rien had taken over wasn't one of theirs. It didn't take long for them to realize that the largest gambling den in the city belonged to Lord Adrian. Rien had likely made a powerful enemy. Lucas, his usual composed expression hiding his growing anger, stepped forward. He confronted Rien, accusing him of shutting down a lawful business without any legal authority. He reminded Rien that the Caradorial Empire had strict laws and breaking them would bring severe consequences. His words emboldened the others, who quickly joined in, claiming Rien had abused his power and arguing that casinos were completely legal businesses. As the crowd gained confidence, more voices rose in agreement with Lucas's objections. However, Rien remained unshaken, his expression calm and composed. He addressed them directly, pointing out their hypocrisy. When he had asked for investments that all claimed to be struggling, yet now that an opportunity for profit had appeared, they were suddenly concerned. He reminded them that most of them had benefited from the casinos and warned that this was their last chance to protect their reputations before he took matters into his own hands. At his words, Rien's soldiers stepped forward, their mere presence a powerful reminder of who was in control. Lucas, speaking on behalf of the others, argued that the Grand Duke would never approve of Rien's reckless behavior. Some guests joined in, pleading with Rien to reconsider and urging him to be more cautious in his actions. But Rien only smiled, knowing his plan was working perfectly. With a steady, commanding voice, he assured them that he was more than willing to have a discussion about the law. Then, with deliberate authority, he gave the order to bring in those who would help clarify the situation. The room fell into uneasy silence as the guests exchanged anxious glances, uncertain of what was about to unfold. At Rien's signal, two men who had been captured at the casino were dragged into the hall. Their hands were tied and their mouths were gagged, preventing them from speaking. Seated among the nobles, Lucas immediately stiffened at the sight of them. These two were always seen alongside Vezurlo, and their sudden appearance unsettled him. A sense of dread crept in as he began to suspect something might have happened to his son. Rien, still composed, turned to Lucas and casually asked if he knew the men. Keeping his face unreadable, Lucas shook his head and denied any connection, cautiously asking what Rien was implying. Rien let out a small, knowing smile and advised him to relax, assuring him that it wasn't anything too serious. He then revealed that these two had attempted to assassinate him the previous day. As the words sank in, Rien's gaze sharpened, and he added that during their capture, the men had boasted about controlling Aisling City and even hinted at having a powerful benefactor supporting them. Lucas' expression darkened, though he struggled to maintain his usual composed demeanor. A thin layer of sweat formed on his forehead as he forced himself to stay calm. Rien then gestured to his soldiers, instructing them to untie the prisoners. With a casual tone, he suggested that perhaps someone in the audience might recognize them, allowing the guests a closer look. The nobles in the hall exchanged nervous glances, their unease growing as they quickly recognized the two captives as Vezurlo's attendants. A heavy silence settled over the room as everyone grasped at the weight of Rien's revelation. Lucas, sensing the danger himself, reacted instantly. Without hesitation, he seized a dagger from the table and lunged at the prisoners with a speed that stunned the onlookers. With a furious snarl, he denounced them as lowly traitors who had dared to target the Duke's son. Before anyone could stop him, he struck them down, ending their lives in an instant. Blood spread across the floor, and the room remained deathly silent. The other nobles, too frightened to interfere, watched in horror as Lucas straightened himself and turned to face Rien. Adopting a look of regret, he bowed his head apologetically. He claimed that his actions were purely out of outrage upon hearing of the attempted assassination and begged for Rien's understanding. Rien, who had expected such a move, responded with an amused smile. He praised Lucas for his quick judgment, commending him as a noble who upheld justice. Lucas, masking his relief, graciously accepted the compliment, insisting he had only done what was necessary. But Rien wasn't finished. Keeping his expression calm, he casually ordered his soldiers to bring out the true mastermind behind the plot. He then turned his gaze back to the nobles, his voice smooth yet laced with challenge, wondering aloud if there were any others in the room as principled as Lucas. At Rien's command, Lucas stiffened as his son, Vezurlo, was dragged into the hall. Completely unaware of the situation, Vezurlo immediately began shouting at the soldiers, demanding to be untied. With an air of entitlement, he bragged about his father's power and warned that everyone in the room would suffer the moment he was freed. Lucas' expression darkened the instant he saw his son. Any confidence he had moments ago disappeared, replaced by sheer dread as he pieced together why Vezurlo had been missing from the banquet. Meanwhile, Vezurlo's gaze fell upon the lifeless bodies of his attendants and his outrage erupted. He spewed insults at Rien, vowing to make him suffer before taking his life. But Rien remained entirely unfazed. Amused, he let out a small chuckle and mockingly pointed out that not only did Vezirlo intend to kill him, but he seemed especially enthusiastic about making it as painful as possible. Vezirlo, too consumed by his anger, failed to notice the shift in the room. He continued his arrogant rant, boasting that no one in Asling would dare defy him and that Rien's fate was already sealed. Turning to Lucas, Rien calmly asked if he shared his son's confidence, yet Vezirlo, still oblivious to Rien's true identity, merely sneered and continued his taunts, completely unaware of the danger he was in. Just as Vezirlo was about to expose his father's involvement, Lucas cut him off with a sharp glare. Panic flickered across his face as he realized how dangerously close his son was to ruining everything. In a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, Lucas scolded Vezirlo harshly, calling him an ungrateful fool. Without hesitation, he commanded his son to kneel before Rien. When Vezirlo hesitated, still too arrogant to grasp the gravity of the situation, Lucas didn't give him a choice. He forced him down, dropping to his own knees beside him. His pride shattered, Lucas pleaded earnestly for Rien's mercy. He offered everything he owned, willing to give up all his wealth if it meant saving Vezirlo's life. It was only then that the truth finally sank in for Vezirlo. Memories of his father's strict orders to earn the Duke's son's favor flashed through his mind. His heart pounded as realization struck. Rien wasn't just some noble playing games, he was the very person Vezirlo had been warned to respect. Fear clouded his expression as he stammered an apology, swearing that he would never make such a mistake again. But Rien's face remained cold, his eyes filled with quiet authority. He told Vezirlo that his soldiers, his influence, and everything that had transpired should have been more than enough to prove his true status. Lucas, seizing the chance to prove his loyalty, swore that the Edwin family would devote themselves to serving Rien. He even offered to surrender all of their unlawfully gained riches as a gesture of goodwill. Rien, however, remained unmoved. He told Lucas plainly that he would accept his offer, but only the part about turning over the assets. If he followed through, Rien assured him that his family would remain unharmed. Lucas, though shaken, exhaled in relief, realizing that for now they had been given a second chance. Lucas bowed his head, expressing his gratitude, but as he cast a glance toward the city lord, a grim realization settled over him. His power had crumbled. Understanding that he had no other option, he leaned in and whispered to Rien, revealing a dangerous secret. He claimed that Lord Eldrick had been conspiring with outside forces, planning to betray the city. Gasps rippled through the room as all eyes snapped to Eldrick, who stood frozen in place, his face pale with fear. Just as Lucas prepared to provide more details, Rien abruptly cut him off. His expression hardened as he accused Lucas of fabricating lies to save himself. Without hesitation, he declared that he had already shown enough mercy. Rien's voice was firm as he ordered his soldiers to seize both Lucas and Vezirlo, commanding their immediate execution. Lucas's face drained of color, his body trembling in shock. He couldn't comprehend why Rien had suddenly turned on him after seemingly offering a lifeline. Meanwhile, Eldrick, overwhelmed with relief, quickly stepped forward. He wasted no time in swearing his unwavering loyalty to Rien, showering him with praise for his wisdom and fairness. Rien, wearing a calm smile, reassured Eldrick that he had complete faith in him. Using his system discreetly, Rien scanned Eldrick's attributes. Among his ordinary stats, one trait stood out: greed. His loyalty score was a mere 15, confirming Rien's suspicion that, much like Lucas, Eldrick was not to be trusted. However, rather than acting immediately, Rien decided to make use of Eldrick's influence and resources to push his own agenda forward.